2011 was a time, people. Punk went into pipe bomb mode. Edge retired from the ring for approximately 9 years due to seriously depressing injuries. WrestleMania 27 remains the most unique entry in the famous pay-per-view series, and The Miz barely remembers any of it. What a year indeed. And one full of fascinating facts that you probably didn't even know about. If only someone decided to make a video about them, eh? Oh wait, yeah, that's my job. So I am Gareth, this is What Culture Wrestling, and here are 10 fascinating facts about WWE in 2011. Number 10, CM Punk's MSG stat still stands. To this day, CM Punk is the last man to win the WWE title inside the hallowed halls of Madison Square Garden. Now, it does feel strange to say that WWE's most famous venue hasn't hosted the top prize switching wrestlers since Survivor Series 2011. But oh boy, yeah, it's true. Punk was the last guy to do it when he beat Alberto Del Rio that November. The belt has changed hands in places like the greatest place on earth, Manchester, England, and also Jeddah, Saudi Arabia since, but not at MSG. Thinking back though, Punk was probably a little bit peeved at Survivor's 2011, wasn't he? The Rock returned to the ring for the first time since 2004 for a bumper tag team bout with John Cena versus The Miz and R-Truth. So that was WWE's leading story for the pay-per-view, and Punk's annoyance at being pushed behind other top names would become something of a trend until he left the promotion in 2014. Still, at least he can boast about something, being the last wrestler in promotional history to win the big one inside the world's most famous arena. It's actually a bit of a shocker that Punk hasn't brought this up in a promo yet. Perhaps that just sadly speaks to the Garden's decreased importance. Number 9, John Cena made WWE draft history. Was this 2011 draft the most useless in history? Now that's up for debate because WWE does have a habit of stepping on their own toes with this thing. However, 2011's version was only valid for around 4 months before creative decided to turn Raw into a super show that featured SmackDown stars too. Now this was a response to the NFL season starting up in September. Thus, it's kinda lost in the mix that John Cena made draft history. He became the first wrestler to get drafted twice in one night. Cena jumped to SmackDown as the top pick early in the special broadcast, then back to Raw as the final pick. Quite why WWE thought this was a good idea is anyone's guess, really. Way to dump all over your own draft, guys. Nothing new there though, right? Being honest, Cena's on-again, off-again switch to SmackDown didn't do much for the blue brand. It just looked like a loser show next to the flagship. Did Vince McMahon take a knock to the head and think Smackers was originally a WCW product or something? Stupid stuff. And while we're talking about the draft, I want to know right now, what is your favorite draft moment of all time? You let me know in the comment section down below. Now back to the video. Number 8, when Edge knew he was on the way out. Edge worked versus Alberto Del Rio at WrestleMania 27, knowing he had a date with Destiny less than 24 hours later. The fan favorite had an MRI booked in for the next day, and docs pretty much told him he had to retire from the ring. So that was actually hanging over Edge heading into Mania, and it must have been an emotional experience for the rated R superstar. He'd eventually grit his teeth and work Mania's opener, knowing it could be his final match ever. Of course, Edge returned to the ring in 2020 for more magical memories before eventually joining AEW, but God only knows how he pulled it together versus Del Rio. WWE didn't seem sure that the MRI would end Edge's career either. I mean, they had him beat Alberto on the Big Show's opener to retain his World Heavyweight title. They had no clue, did they? Later, Christian would be drafted in to replace Edge for a ladder match with Del Rio at Extreme Rules. And there's just no way that Adam Copeland could have worked that sort of match given his physical condition. Hell, the fact he was even able to work Mania was a minor miracle. The man is a superhero. Number 7, The Miz doesn't remember his Mania main event. See here the image of the face of a man who doesn't have a clue where he is or what is going on. The Miz suffered a concussion when John Cena speared him on the concrete at ringside during Mania 27's main event, and he still doesn't actually remember what happened after that. In short, Miz can't remember the bout's finishing stretch, or really anything after his head bounced off the floor. There is some footage online of Miz asking WWE officials if he did a good job. He's stumbling around confused and out of it. It's honestly quite scary to watch. Knowing all that, it is amazing that Cena and The Rock, who interfered to give Miz the win, were able to pull everything together for the finish. Miz's old pal Alex Riley was involved too. It had to be a bummer for Miz to crash back down to earth post-match and try to grasp what had actually happened out there. Like this was his first Mania headliner, and the poor sod doesn't even remember the most important part of it. Concussions are serious business, folks. Number 6, the only Mania with no title changes. How's that for a crap stat? WrestleMania 27 remains the only entry in the iconic event series with no title changes to speak of. Sure, the card only had 3 title bouts on it, but none of those belts changed hands. Edge retained the Old World title versus Alberto Del Rio. Sheamus held onto the US strap in a pre-show lumberjack bout versus Daniel Bryan. WrestleMania 10, and The Miz defended his WWE title versus John Cena in the main event. This had never happened before, and thankfully hasn't happened since. Every single other WrestleMania show has had at least one title switch on it. For some reason, WWE reasoned that wasn't necessary in 2011, even though if you polled 100 people, 100 of them would have picked Cena to beat Miz that night. But The Rock had something to say about that before setting up his once-in-a-lifetime scrap with John the next night. Yep, once in a lifetime. Royal Rumble winner Del Rio failed to win big gold despite Edge's forthcoming retirement, and the United States title situation was just dumped onto the non-pay-per-view portion of Mania. And as legend has it, Sheamus picked working Bryan over a match with Rey Mysterio. You might have regretted that in the end. Thank you very much for checking out this fascinating video today, my friends. And if you're enjoying what you're watching, then hit that subscribe button down below and you'll get more of this fascinating stuff in your life. Now back to the video. Number 5, Randy Orton torched WWE in an interview. This was a bit unexpected, but maybe it shouldn't have been considering Randy Orton's bad boy reputation. The Viper appeared on the Phoenix-based rock station 98 KUPD to promote WrestleMania, but instead ended up burning the whole business down around him in a startling interview. Orton talked candidly about his past drug use, claimed The Rock needed a teleprompter because he couldn't remember his promos, and said that Kelly liked to sleep around with the whole roster. Yikes. Naturally, this got Randy some serious heat behind the scenes, but that wasn't reflected with a demotion on screen. He was deemed pretty much untouchable as a TV character, wasn't he? In fairness, Orton did at least offer an apology to Kelly for his remarks. Keep in mind that WWE was right in the thick of the PG era around this time, so corporate child-friendly investors/sponsors would not have been chuffed to hear Randy scorch the earth like this. But he did it anyway, cause he could. Number 4, Kevin Nash was almost the anonymous Raw GM. Now this right here is something else. A few former WWE writers have revealed to the media that Big Sexy was originally penciled in to be the anonymous Raw GM, but WWE had to wait on his TNA contract to lapse before they could pull the trigger. Now Kevin Nash did get out of his TNA deal to appear as a surprise in the 2011 Royal Rumble. How could we forget? He then joined the company later that year for one last run, but he was ultimately never actually involved with the GM spot. Apparently, plans changed. Shocking. It is rather interesting that creative would pin their hopes on a wrestler contracted elsewhere in the first place. That'd be like WWE's writers drafting up a storyline today with an AEW star in mind, and then just waiting for their deal to run down before they can actually do anything with it. It's a strange way to do business. In retrospect, Nash would have been a much better choice for the laptop GM reveal than Hornswoggle. This is simply what happens when wrestling books a story without thinking of the conclusion first. Let's just see what happens. Or here's a thought, let's not. Number 3, CM Punk was ready to fight post-Pipe Bomb. CM Punk's Pipe Bomb promo on the 27th of June 2011 episode remains one of the most shocking moments in Raw's rich history. But there was almost more drama behind the curtain than in front of it. In fact, Punk thought his speech would annoy so many people backstage that they'd all be waiting for a fistfight. So he exited to the side of the Raw stage rather than through Gorilla. Sure enough, the hallways were empty because the entire roster was jammed up close to the entrance waiting to see what might happen. And shortly thereafter, Punk had one of the trippiest conversations of his entire life. Chris Masters hilariously walked up and asked Punk, "Did you just hear what Punk said?" Somehow, Masters didn't realize it was him at first. Brilliant. Even Punk was confused, like Chris, it's me. Punk told this story on AEW's Unrestricted podcast in 2021. Before that company's name was mud to him. WWE's roster didn't erupt into a brawl, of course, but it's still fun to find out that CM figured he'd ruffled a fair few feathers with his work. Number 2, Brock Lesnar almost did a Floyd Mayweather. Did you know the stare down Brock Lesnar had with The Undertaker at UFC 121 was supposed to facilitate something more at WrestleMania 27? UFC head Dana White said no chance though. So Taker's moment just became a curious cameo more than anything else. There's actually nothing stopping WWE from pulling something similar in 2024 with other MMA fighters. But maybe they wouldn't be stars the stature of a Brock. Regardless, some sort of WWE and UFC interaction is surely on the cards now both companies are under the same umbrella, right? But back to the subject of Lesnar and Undertaker, it's believed that Lesnar would have worked some sort of wrestler versus fighter scenario at Mania 27. Yep, akin to Floyd Mayweather versus Big Show back in 2008. Brock's WWE history would have been easy to explore here, but he wasn't actually the first choice that Vince McMahon had in mind for The Undertaker on the biggest card of the entire year. Dana may have said no for Brock, but this legend said no for himself. Number 1, Sting turned down WWE's Hall of Fame. WWE's bold plan for WrestleMania 27 included inducting Sting into the Hall of Fame, then lining up a huge dream match versus The Undertaker. What a weekend that would have been. As the story goes, the Stinger was hesitant to agree due to WWE's checkered past when booking ex-WCW stars. So in the end, he said thanks, but no thanks. Cryptic teasers did air on television before the plug was pulled though, which is quite interesting. That just did not matter to Sting though. And come to think of it, what was it with WWE in 2011 and starting angles with TNA's top talent in mind? Very specific. The Stinger wouldn't sign with Vince McMahon's league until 2014, but his 2014 to 2015 run there is generally considered a bit of a waste of everyone's time. And another thing, where would Triple H versus Taker have fit into all this? Perhaps that was a last-minute switcheroo once it became clear that Sting was not playing ball. WWE got things rolling on Trips versus the Deadman in late February after all, the same 21st of February date that had been referenced in those teasers. What could have been, eh? Have you enjoyed this fascinating look at the year of 2011 in WWE? Well, go and check out this other video right here about some fascinating WrestleMania facts. You're gonna have such a fun time, you lucky person. Now, bye-bye.